It has been estimated that during the Holocaust, approximately one-third of the Jewish population was killed off by the Nazis. Many remember the atrocities that were committed by the Nazis during World War II, but not many know how the criminals were tried. How were those that contributed to the atrocities of the Holocaust punished? After Germany's defeat in World War I, they were forced to pay huge war reparations that destroyed the German economy, further rubbing in their defeat. Feeding off this hate, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party came to power, blaming the Jews for the bad German economy and constantly oppressing them. Soon, the Nazi ideology expanded to the final solution, which called for the total extermination of the Jewish people. At the same time, the Germans were fighting for world domination in Europe and were able to kill 6 million Jews before their defeat to the Allied armies of the United States, the Soviet Union, the UK, and China in 1945. During this time, the Nazis committed many war crimes and crimes against humanity. They used poisonous gas against a declaration explicitly forbidding the use of poison or poisonous weapons in warfare, mistreated prisoners of war, and most notably, the Nazis gassed millions of Jews, Poles, Gypsies, and the disabled that they thought of as undeserving of life. They built concentration camps that would house these gas chambers, killing up to 6,000 per day, while still forcing its occupants to work for Germany by creating weapons for their war. These inmates were given little food and were treated like animals. The world had never seen an atrocity on this level and did not know how to prosecute those that assisted with these war crimes. In 1944, American President Franklin Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill briefly suggested that the highest-ranking members of the Nazi Party should be executed without a legal trial or proceeding of any kind. However, it was later decided that Nazi leaders could not be executed without first being afforded the opportunity to defend themselves in a judicial proceeding. The Nuremberg trials later served as a precedent for any other prosecution of war crimes like the ones in Japan. These trials also led to the establishment of the United Nations Genocide Convention and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, as well as the Geneva Convention on the Laws and Customs of War in 1949, all helping to more fairly punish the most heinous crimes.
In August 1945, numerous world powers like the United States, the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and France signed a charter, creating the International Military Tribunal, or IMT, to bring justice to some of the major German leaders responsible for aggression, crimes against humanity, and related atrocities. It was decided that trials would be held in Nuremberg, Germany. This was the spot where the Nazi ideology was born, and it was seen as a good symbolic end to the regime. Before they could be tried, many of Adolf Hitler's top aides, as well as Hitler himself, committed suicide or tried to flee with the Allied armies closing in. Not all of his aides were able to escape their crimes and were captured by the Allied armies. Some would try to commit suicide after being sentenced by the tribunal, and then of the 24 defendants, 3 were acquitted, 9 were imprisoned, and 12 were sentenced to death. Following the main set of trials, the subsequent Nuremberg trials were a series of 12 U.S. military tribunals. Some of the most notable trials were the Doctor's Trial, the Milch Trial, the Judge's Trial, the Pole Trial, the Russia Trial, and the High Command Trial. First, the Doctor's Trial was against German physicians for the systematic killing of those they deemed unworthy of life, and all were charged with the crimes against humanity and war crimes, leading to their death sentences. The Milch trial was for the former Field Marshal Luftwaffe Erhard Milch, who was also accused of having committed war crimes and crimes against humanity and was sentenced to life in prison. The Judge's Trial was against 16 members of the Reich Ministry of Justice, or People's and Special Courts, which raised the issue of what responsibility judges might have for enforcing unjust but arguably binding laws. They are all charged with war crimes against civilians of territories occupied by Germany and against soldiers of countries at war with Germany. In the Pole trial, the head administrator of the Nazi concentration camps, Oswald Pohl, and his entire SS main economic and administrative office were tried for their participation in a conspiracy to commit war crimes and crimes against humanity. The tribunal sentenced some, including Oswald, to death and the rest to prison.
The Russia trial was against Ulrich Greffelt and 14 others who were responsible for the implementation of the Nazi pure race programs. These programs sought out the perfect Aryans to join Germany and to eliminate their society's defects, such as the disabled. They were tried for accounts of crimes against humanity, war crimes, and memberships in the SS. The High Command trial was for those German command officers who had been charged for crimes against humanity, crimes against peace, and involvement in a criminal group which planned or participated in the numerous executions within Germany. They were either sentenced to life or 10 to 20 years in prison.
In general, these secondary trials were for the purpose of determining the guilt of second-tier Nazis accused of those crimes. In total, the United States indicted 183 defendants in 12 subsequent Nuremberg trials. These resulted in 12 imposed deaths, 8 life sentences, and 77 terms of imprisonment. Other defendants were acquitted. A common defense for many of these Nazis was that they were just simply following orders from their superiors. But this, however, was not an accepted defense in these trials. In conclusion, the punishments for the atrocities that the Nazis committed ranged from short prison sentences to death. There was a primary trial for the highest of Hitler's aides, followed by a secondary trial for all arrests that committed an atrocity. These criminals were given full trials, led by fair Allied-appointed judges, translators to their native language, and the right to an attorney.
They were able to present evidence in their defense and were assumed innocent until proven beyond reasonable doubt, or guilty. Although the Nazis committed barbaric crimes, the Allies were able to stay rational and give them full trials instead of just killing them all out of spite.